Hi guys, it's Todd. Now, I got my notes like always. I don't want to make sure I hit every point. Now, in this video, I'm going to talk about how the United States may experience another Great Depression in year 2027. Now, you may think this is crazy, but hear my argument first, okay? If you think the economy is bad now, wait till you get the cumulative effect of the immigration, the big beautiful bill, food stamps cuts, Medicaid cuts, tariffs, and student loans. It's all going to be very disastrous for the United States economy. It will not only affect housing, tourism, grocery stores, alcohol, hardware stores, home appliances, home furniture, trucking, truck stops, hospitals, medical clinics, healthcare. It's going to have a major effect on every part of our economy. Now, before I get into it, I have to provide a little bit of history so you know where we once was and where we're going to be in the future. Do you remember what we were taught about the Great Depression of the 1920s and how there were soup kitchens? When the Great Depression was over, the federal government created the food stamp programs, and the food stamps last a person for a whole month. This resulted in eliminating all soup kitchens. So by the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s, and even into the 90s, there were no soup kitchens, and there was only about 5 food pantries or food banks around the country. However, by year 2010, the Republican Party changed the food stamp program to the point that food stamps used to last for a whole month, but now food stamps only last about 2 weeks. Now this has hurt a lot of people, but people were still able to get by because of food banks. Even today, in some parts of the United States, you can still see cars lining up to receive food from food banks. So instead of seeing people lined up in front of soup kitchens like it was in the 1920s and 1930s, and today, in some areas, now you see lines of cars waiting to receive food. Plus, this is also when soup kitchens started to come back. So the cuts in the food stamp program has created Great Depression-like conditions. This also means that today, many people in the United States, particularly in the rural areas, are food insecure. Now, the Obama administration tried to address this issue by creating a grant program where farmers would grow food directly for food pantries or food banks. However, also during the Obama administration in year 2009, we saw makeshift medical clinics show up all over the United States providing free medical services. This is when it was revealed that the United States medical system was very bad. It was so bad that Doctors Beyond Borders were working at some of these makeshift medical clinics. Now, Doctors Beyond Borders work mostly in developing countries. This is also when the Affordable Care Act, or the ACA, or what some people call Obamacare, was signed into law. It provided health care to millions of Americans. It saved a lot of people's lives. It expanded Medicaid and provided financial subsidies to help people afford health insurance. It helped a lot of people who were working jobs, but the jobs were not providing any health care or health insurance. Like the gig economy, like Uber drivers, and other small businesses. Now, I was one of them. I was at the time attempting to start my own business, but could not afford to purchase any health insurance for myself. Then in the year 2012, I developed diabetes. I was paying all my medical expenses, including all the doctor visits. And then in 2018, I developed cancer. So without the Medicaid expansion, I probably would be dead by now. Then in 2007, I met a man who was receiving Medicare, and he was diabetic. He told me that Medicare only paid for about 10 months of his insulin. So for the other 2 months of the year, he had to check himself into the hospital to receive insulin, which is insane. And because 2 months in the hospital costs way more than 2 months of insulin. A month of insulin only costs about $1,000. In 2022, the Biden administration was able to lower the cost of insulin to $35 a month for everyone. Now, except for people who are receiving Medicare, the big, beautiful bill took this away. However, a lot of drug companies said they're going to still provide people, insulin at $35. The point is that the big, beautiful bill cuts out a lot of healthcare coverage, some of which I will cover later in this video. So now you understand a little bit about history and how bad things can get and what you have to look forward to. So now I'm going to start my argument and talk about how immigration, the big beautiful bill, food stamps cuts, Medicaid cuts, tariffs, and student loans are probably going to send the United States into another Great Depression. None of these on their own will cause another Great Depression, but the cumulative effect, or adding them all up, has the potential of causing a Great Depression by year 2027. Now, to set the foundation for my argument, I'm gonna let this man talk in the next video clip because he does a much better job at explaining than what I can.
After mass deportations, you might expect that there are thousands of additional jobs for U.S. workers, but your research doesn't really show that that happens. Can you just explain why mass deportations cause such economic harm, such job loss for U.S. workers?
Yes. So there are several reasons, one of which I think is widely understood by the American people, but the others not so well understood. The one that's well understood is people often say, oh, well, unauthorized immigrants take jobs that Americans aren't willing to do, so if you remove them, the Americans aren't going to go, someone who lost their job in a factory in Maine is not going to go to the Central Valley of California to pick fruits and vegetables. People get that point. But there are several other, arguably even more important reasons why this is happening. One is a simple issue that we refer to as the demand side effect, which is not complicated at all. But there are about 8 million unauthorized workers in the United States. They earn hundreds of billions of dollars every year. They spend that money on food, clothing, stores, rent, et cetera, et cetera. And if you take those people out, those hundreds of billions, they're going to lose their jobs, lose their income, and that hundreds of billions of dollars of spending goes away, which means American businesses are going to sell hundreds of billions of dollars less, which means they're going to cut back on production, which means they're going to cut back on their workforces, which mean American workers are also going to lose their jobs. There's a second, probably even more important issue, and that is that people seem to think that unauthorized immigrants are simply close substitutes for American workers. But that's not the way the work goes. People have been studying this now for the last 20 plus years and have found that, in fact, in most cases, unauthorized immigrants are not substitutes, but they're what we call complementary workers. They work in conjunction with other workers, not in competition with them. And what happens is if you strip out, for example, in a restaurant, the 3 or 4 workers in the back who are chopping the vegetables, cleaning the bathrooms, etc., and you can't replace them, then the American worker who may be overseeing the restaurant, who may be a waiter or waitress, they lose their jobs as well. All of you can understand that. All of you have staff. You have excellent staff. If we suddenly take away 25% of your staff, you're not going to be as productive as you are now. You're going to not do as well. So the problem is that we find that when you take out these hundreds of thousands of undocumented workers, not only do they lose their jobs, authorized immigrants often lose their jobs, and American citizens lose their jobs, usually in roughly equal numbers.
Now, I hope you now understand that everything is connected. What affects one area can have a negative effect on many other areas. Like the man said in the video, by deporting undocumented immigrants is not creating jobs, but it actually is increasing job loss for United States citizens. This has resulted in a delay in completing constructions for homes and buildings, farmers not being able to harvest their crops, plus it also had an effect on many other industries that we don't even realize. For example, the United States is now importing a lot more beef from Argentina and Brazil. And this is because the meatpacking plants do not have the staff to process all the beef. Our cattle ranchers have lost a lot of their overseas businesses to countries like Australia, Brazil, and Argentina, which means that they're going to have to also lay off a lot more people, thus more job loss. And like the man said in the video, all those undocumented immigrants who are being deported are causing a lot more retail stores to close, restaurants to close, which translates into more job loss. Like I keep saying, all of it is connected in some kind of way. Now all this is connected to the trucking industry. Since you have less goods going to retail and other places, you have less trucks that are needed to deliver these products. Thus more job loss for the trucking industry. In fact, if you visit a truck stop today at night, you'll see a lot of truck stops empty. So the job loss for the trucking industry is already occurring. And it's only going to get worse. Plus, the way the United States is rounding up and detaining undocumented immigrants has caused many countries to issue warnings to their citizens when visiting the United States. Countries such as Canada, France, the Netherlands, and Germany have issued warnings to the citizens that they may not want to visit the United States. This has caused many parts of the United States that rely heavily on tourism to lose revenue, which has caused more job loss. States like Florida and Las Vegas have seen a sharp decline in tourism. This means a lot more job loss for hotels, restaurants, attractions, and Airbnbs. Now let's take into account the tariffs. Now, because of the tariffs, construction costs for new homes and buildings have increased. However, I have to admit that over the last 3 to 4 years, the prices of homes has been decreasing by about 7%. But this is only because they're already overpriced. Now, many people understand that homes are going to increase because the cost of lumber is going to increase. The cost of steel and aluminum is going to also increase. But people also forget to take into account the cost of finishing the products or the finishing of the homes, such as the cost of tile, lighting, plumbing fixtures, kitchen sinks, kitchen faucets, roofing material are also going to increase. Thus, the cost of homes for new and renovated homes are also going to increase. Also, because of the tariffs, our farmers have lost all of their overseas customers. No one is buying soybeans, wheat, or rice or any of our agricultural products in other countries. Now they're buying it from Argentina, Brazil, and other South American countries. This has caused many farms, especially small to mid-sized farms, to go out of business. Even the bigger farms are now hurting. And this translates into a lost revenue for all the businesses that support and rely on the agricultural industry. Plus, states such as Nebraska, Arkansas, Iowa, Missouri, and many others are no longer receiving all the tax revenue from the agricultural industry. This means that these states in the future are going to have problems paying their bills. Even Nebraska currently is having problems paying its bills. And this will result in these states relying heavily on government bailouts now and way into the future, for years and years into the future. This also means that the farmers are also going to need bailouts currently and also years to come. Now, this has not only affected retail stores or grocery stores and the trucking industry, but it also have affected other industry as well, such as distilleries. Countries like Canada and the European Union have stopped buying whiskey from our distilleries here with the United States. And this has caused many small and mid-sized distilleries to currently go out of business. And large distilleries that produce products like Jack Daniels, they now have a warehouse full of product that they cannot sell. Therefore, they are not producing any new products because they cannot sell the old product. This also means that the distilleries no longer need the grains and the wheat they used to make the product. Therefore, these distilleries have canceled all of their orders from the farmers who supply them with these agricultural products. All of these distilleries, the farmers, the trucking industry, and many other industries that rely or support the agricultural industry have had to do massive layoffs. Thus, more job loss. Then take into account the fisheries on the East Coast. The fisheries on the East Coast used to sell a lot of products to China and to Europe. Europe and China used to buy a lot of lobsters from the fisheries on the East Coast. But now they're buying all the lobsters from Canada. So all these fisheries on the East Coast have lost most of their overseas businesses or overseas customers, which translates into more job loss. What also translates into the small and medium-sized fisheries on the East Coast going out of business or going bankrupt. Like I keep saying, everything is connected. I only mention a few things.
What is happening right now is devastation. And that's not too strong of a word on some farms. Now, you've had land value increase over time, and that means they can collateralize operating loans. And so some of them can get loans, operating loans to plant for next year, but some of them will be challenged and they will move into a risk of bankruptcy. And it's not just what's happening on the farm, that means what's happening in their communities, right? What's happening at the hardware store, what's happening at the school, etc. And I think it's important that we all understand rural America, 19% of the population, by the way, they comprise 44% of the military. Service is deeply embedded in these communities. And when you don't have income, when you don't have revenue, rural hospitals have shut down, rural banks have shut down. 70% of the counties in America that index as food insecure are in rural America, housing crisis, etc. And so when I'm out in the country, and I'm there quite frequently with farmers or in these communities, it's present that you have these conversations and you try to understand what's going on with their families. 90% of farms are still family owned. These are families.
Okay, now let's talk about food stamps and the Medicaid cuts. 40 to 50% of people live in the states such as Arkansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and many others receive Medicaid. And if they receive Medicaid, they also qualify for food stamps. So 40% of these people in these states receive food stamps. And in some states, some of the red or Republican states, over 70% of the people in those states are receiving food stamps. Now in the year 2026, the Big Beautiful Bill had added in 2 requirements. One requirement is that a person has to be working to receive food stamps or Medicaid. Or if they're not working, they have to be able to volunteer somewhere. They put in this requirement because they said that any able-bodied person should be able to work to receive government benefits. Now on paper, this may sound reasonable, but in practice, it's going to be devastating. As I stated earlier, 40 to 50% of the people in rural areas of the United States, especially in the red states, the Republican states, are receiving Medicaid and also are receiving food stamps. In regards to Medicaid, the hospitals and the medical clinics in those areas receive most of their revenue or income from Medicaid. And with the Medicaid cuts, it can mean that most of the hospitals and clinics are going to close. In fact, today, many hospitals and medical clinics in these rural areas are also closing. But in 2027, it's going to be disastrous. All nursing homes receive their income and revenue from Medicaid. Medicare does not cover nursing home costs, and most private insurance also does not cover nursing home costs. Thus, for a lot of nursing homes, they're also going to have to close. And remember, if you're not working, you cannot receive Medicaid or food stamps. And if you've ever been to any of these rural areas like I have, I've been all over the country, from the East Coast to the West Coast to the South, all the way to the North. And most of these areas, there is no industry, there is no jobs, and that's why most of these people are receiving Medicaid or are on food stamps. So when the requirement kicks in 2027, and they have to be working or have to have a job, there will be no way they will be able to fulfill that requirement because there is no industry within these areas. There are whole towns, whole communities that are receiving food stamps because there is no jobs, there is no way to make money. And this is for communities that are Black, white, Asian, and Latino. Now add to this all the farm closing, all the farms going bankrupt. And some of these rural areas, the only job they have is in the agricultural industry. That's when those farms go under, that's going to create even more job loss. And as a farmer, if you're not working, you have a job, you can't get food stamps. So all the people who were your employees, they're not working now and they won't be able to get food stamps. And don't forget about all the businesses that support and rely on agriculture or the hospitals. Because in some areas, the only industry or the only business around are the hospitals. If those hospitals and the medical clinics go under, all the restaurants and grocery stores and delivery services that support those hospitals, they're also going to go under or go out of business. So that's creating even more job losses. Like I keep saying, everything is really connected. Medicaid and Medicare are connected to farms, and connected to hospitals, connected to trucking, connected to retail stores, and many other industries that we don't even realize. It's going to create a downward spiral that is just going to create more and more job loss. Now they say you can volunteer and fulfill the requirement that way. But the problem is, in many of these areas, there's no place to volunteer. And the Big Beautiful Bill, it cuts a lot of funding for these programs where a person could volunteer, such as senior citizen centers, suicide hotlines, domestic violence shelters, helping people with disabilities find employment, All of that has been cut. So basically, there won't be any place where these people will be able to volunteer to fulfill their requirements. So a lot of people in these rural areas have no industry, no employment, no way to volunteer, thus no way to fulfill the requirements to receive food stamps or Medicaid. So in the future, when these cuts kick in, or these requirements kick in, I have no idea how they're going to feed their family or themselves. And then if someone gets sick, there's no medical clinic or there's no hospital within the area. And if there were, how are they going to pay how are they going to pay the bill? Because they no longer are receiving Medicaid. Now I'm going to talk about student loans. If you look at this graph, the number of delinquencies when it comes to the loans has, in the past 90 days, hit the highest it's ever been in history. As you can see from this chart, nothing like this has ever happened in history. Delinquencies have skyrocketed, a straight vertical trajectory. This has been done with purpose and intent, and let me explain. The reason why is that the Trump administration has changed all the rules. They've changed the rules because they need to bring in as much money as is possible to pay for all the tax cuts for the billionaires and the multimillionaires. So they purposely and with intent are causing a lot of people to go into delinquency on their student loans. Plus, they have made it almost impossible for anyone to stay in or go into any type of income contingency repayment plan or any type of student loan forgiveness program. And until you come out of delinquency, you cannot go into one of these programs. Remember when Trump first became president? The United States Congress and many others asked to see his tax returns, but they weren't able to get them because of privacy laws. This also meant that people who became delinquent on their student loans could stay in delinquency for decades or until they started to collect Social Security retirement. This was because there was no way the government could ever know where you were working, and thus could never garnish your wages. Plus, according to the law, your Social Security retirement or Social Security disability could not be used to pay off your student loans. However, there's a loophole in the law that will allow them to use your Social Security to pay off your student loans, and I will discuss this later in the video. Now, the Trump administration fired the head of the IRS and put in a new guy. And this new guy gave Homeland Security and the Department of Education all copies of our tax returns. So now, with cross-referencing our Social Security number to our W-2s, the Department of Education now can figure out where we are working. And because of that, they can now garnish our wages. Therefore, there is no way a person can stay in delinquency for months or even years, even decades. Because now they know where you work at, and they can always just go in and garnish your wages. Now, this will result in that if you're a person working paycheck to paycheck, barely able to pay rent, barely able to buy food, put gas in your car and get to work, it's going to put you into a financial hole. This means it's going to be devastating to millions of Americans. The group that has the highest number of delinquencies are people over 50. There are still over 2 million people over 50 who are still paying off their student loans. So if you think or you feel like you'll never be able to pay off your student loans, you are not alone. These people took out loans or student loans back in the 70s, the 80s, even the 90s, and they're still trying to pay them off. Back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, the interest rates on student loans were 8 to 9%. Now this next part is important. So if you know anyone over 50 years old, you need to let them know about the next part. This next part is about the loophole in the law that allows them to go into your Social Security and garnish that income to pay your student loans. Now it is within the law that says that they cannot use your Social Security retirement or your Social Security disability to pay your student loans. However, the loophole says that if you pick up a penny off the street, you make $1 at the garage sale, or put $1 from a retirement account like a Roth IRA or something, and put it into the same bank account your student loans are in, then that will allow them to come in and take money out of that bank account to pay your student loans. As long as the only money that is going into that bank account is your Social Security check, they cannot garnish those particular wages. Now, one way of getting around this is to ask Social Security to provide you with a debit card. And they would just put the money directly on the debit card each month. But the issue is, or the problem is, that they have fired so many people from the Social Security Administration that it may take months or even years to now receive one of those debit cards. The other problem is a lot of these banks or branches do not know the law. And when they receive a letter from the federal government asking, we need to garnish your wages out of your banking account, they're probably gonna let them do it. And because even though you might say that the only money going into that bank account, a lot of these branch managers don't know how the law works. Now the Trump administration knows that people who are collecting Social Security or who are delinquent do not have the money to hire a lawyer and fight it. Thus all these people are prime candidates to be taken advantage of. No administration in the past has ever used this loophole. The Trump administration needs to bring in as much money as possible to pay for all those tax cuts for the billionaires and the multimillionaires. So they may do this or use this loophole sometime in the future. This will translate into people who can barely pay rent, buy food, put gas in the car to get to work are going to be financially devastated. And because of the Medicare cuts or the Medicaid cuts to programs like Meals on Wheels, senior citizen centers, nursing homes, and many other services for senior citizens, the result is going to be unbelievable, horrific. Now I know I talked a lot about job loss, but job loss is only the symptom. It is not the disease. The more money you have flowing through the economy, the stronger and healthier your economy is going to be. That the disease is the reduction of the flow of money through the economy. Everything I mentioned within this video is going to reduce the flow of money through our economy. I know that many Republican politicians have talked about the trickle-down theory of economics, or what they call the supply side of economics. And for millions of people, this sounds reasonable. However, I think it's one of the most ridiculous, asinine things I've ever heard. And here's the reason why. Okay, now the supply side economics or trickle-down theory says that if we give more money to the rich or the wealthy, or corporations like tax cuts, then they will create more products and thus have to buy more equipment and therefore hire more people. But if you ever own a business, you know that this is ridiculous. Businesses do not operate that way. If you own a business, you are not going to make more product just because someone gives you more money. You're not going to put the time, the effort, or the energy to make those products if you do not have a customer who's going to purchase those particular products. It would just be a waste of your time. You're not going to have a warehouse full of product that you cannot sell. You're not going to have all your money tied up into a product that you cannot sell. So the only way you're going to make a product is that you have the potential or the chance of selling that product to a customer. So it doesn't matter if it gives me, tax cuts or anything else. I'm not going to make that product unless I have someone to who I know is going to buy that product or have the potential of selling that product. Now, if you take money out of the economy, it means that more people's disposable income is going to decrease. A decrease in disposable income means the less customers I'm going to have to be able to sell those particular products to. Therefore, really taking more money out of the flow of the economy. Basically, no company is going to hire or keep people on their payroll if they have no work for them to do. But the more money you take out of the economy or flowing through the economy, the more you are reducing people's disposable income. And the more people's disposable income is reduced, the less customers I'm going to have. There's less product I'm going to be able to sell. Thus, I won't produce any new products, and I'm going to have to start laying off people. Therefore, nothing's going to trickle down, and no additional jobs are going to be created. Supply-side economics is only viable when the economy is doing good. If the economy is doing good, there's no reason to implement any type of supply-side economics. The supply-side economics is really ridiculous. And all of this will have a cumulative effect on companies producing less, thus creating even more job loss. All these policies the Trump administration is implementing is going to reduce people's disposable income. And all this will have a cumulative effect of companies producing less products and thus creating even more job loss. And the only way to get us out of another Great Depression is the same thing as what we did back in the 1930s. The government did massive government spending. They created a lot of government programs, and they taxed the heck out of the rich. Okay, that's about it. I'm done. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and all that stuff. Okay, thank you.